Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the GSL-English podcast. My name is Gideon, and this is a podcast for all learners of English to practice and improve in a relaxed and natural way. I hope you are doing well. I hope you've had a good week. Now, in today's episode, we're going to read about one of the most famous mobile phone games of all time. Or I'll just say applications, because you can play this game on tablets and whatever. So we're going to read about one of the most famous games of all time and how it became so famous. Where did it come from? So I'm going to tell you what that game is at the moment, but the reason that we're particularly going to study this article is, one, there's fantastic vocabulary in there. There's some brilliant expressions that we're going to look at and see how we can use them in our day-to-day conversations. But also, I think this story is really encouraging. Simply from the fact that it's very true that we often only see someone else's success as an end result, don't we? We only see the success. Particularly when it comes to English. Perhaps we're talking to somebody in English and we're thinking, oh, wow, their English is amazing. Their accent, their pronunciation, it's incredible. Their vocabulary, their use of idioms, oh, I wish I could do that. We only see the end result, don't we? We don't see all the years of hard work, mistakes, nerves, studying, practice speaking. We don't see all of that. We just focus on the end result. And sometimes I think it's important for us to remember that everybody has been on the journey, which doesn't always go well, doesn't always mean immediate success, and particularly translating this to English, everyone's been on that journey where we make mistakes, we pronounce words incorrectly, we're not comfortable with our accent, we do feel nervous, but we only compare ourselves to the end result of others. And I think this story of this game is really encouraging. So that's enough babbling by me. So as I say, we're going to read the article paragraph by paragraph, focus being on vocabulary and expressions, but also I think there's a really important lesson that we can take away from their story. So if you are new here, before we get started, please don't forget to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and follow along if you're listening on Spotify. I post episodes weekly and regularly to help you, just as I said earlier, just to improve your English in the most real, natural and authentic way possible. That's the goal. And if you are a returning viewer, I do apologise for my hideously dull background. If you are watching on YouTube, I hate it. But as you know, I'm in the process of just settling into my new home, so I've had no time to make things look a little bit more fancy. So I do despise this dull and boring background. But bear with me, got some exciting changes coming. But that's enough. That's enough babbling. That's enough nattering. Let's get into it. Now is the time, if you are a returning viewer, just to pause, grab a cup of tea, grab a coffee, glass of wine, whatever you want, as well as, just practicing your English. I do want you to relax, just calm down, just wind down and enjoy studying this with me. So now's the time to pause, get what you want, get comfortable, grab a blanket, get on the sofa, have your coffee break, whatever it is. Now's the time to do that. And then when you come back, we'll get into the article. All right. I feel like that needed, as always, some little just musical break. But I haven't got it. So we just have to settle for just a very slight pause. Okay, here we go. The story behind the iconic game Angry Birds. Okay, that's the game we're going to talk about. Angry Birds. And it describes this as being an iconic game. And if something is an icon, if something is iconic, it stands on a pedestal. We look at it as the top of its niche, of whatever it's doing. For example, an iconic singer, everybody's heard of it. Everybody knows them. Everybody looks up to them. Angry Birds is an iconic game. So many games are based on it. So many people have downloaded it, have played it. In fact, I think it's had around over 5 billion downloads. Angry Birds. 5 billion. That is unbelievable. So the story behind this game, this article is taken from LinkedIn, and a lovely article written by Sujay Krishnan. So thank you, Sujay. So here you go. 2 developers of Rovio Entertainment. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see a picture of them there. We've got Mikael Head and Niklas Head. So they're brothers. And this is the game. That might jog your memory a little bit. Angry Birds. But if you're listening on Spotify, don't worry. I'm sure you know the game, but if you don't, you'll become familiar with it by the end of this episode. Okay, so let's take the first paragraph here and then see what we can glean from it. Rovio might seem like an overnight success, but the story was full of struggle and many attempts before making it a big gaming app. In 2009, Rovio was a small gaming studio in Finland that was on the verge of bankruptcy. It had fired most of its staff and was left with only 12 employees. The company had been founded in 2003 by students who'd won a video game making competition and thought it would be fun to start their own studio. So, as it states at the beginning there, this company, Rovio, might, because of the success of Angry Birds, you might think, it's an overnight success. And when we talk about an overnight success, we're basically saying that it was immediate. It happened overnight, meaning that they released the game one day, the next day, complete success. And often when we see the success of Angry Birds, that's what a lot of people assume, that it was just a very almost lucky success. But in fact, the story was full of struggles and many attempts before making this big app. So in 2009, it says that Rovio was a small gaming studio based in Finland that was on the verge of bankruptcy. Now, if something is on the verge of happening, it's extremely close. If we think of perhaps a ball at the top of a hill, right at the top of the hill, just about to roll down, it would just take one push, it's on the verge of falling down the hill. Or perhaps have you ever been on the verge of crying, meaning that the tears are so close, it's just about to happen, but not quite started yet. You can be on the verge of crying, on the verge of laughing. Well, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. And of course, bankruptcy, saying that the company is no more, we've got no more funding, no more money, we're going to have to file for bankruptcy. So that was its state in 2009. It was on the verge, very close, on the line, just one little push to being bankrupt. At this point, it had fired most of its staff, meaning that it had said to the staff, don't come back to work, there's no job for you. And they only had 12 employees. So the company had been started in 2003 by students who'd won a video game making competition. And they thought, let's start their own studio. So that's where they were at this point. They discovered they were able to make some cool games, but distribution was hard. They'd made 51 titles before Angry Birds, but the model was quickly proving unviable. During many a times, the idea of closing down came to their minds until they decided to go with the final shot, and that was when the Angry Birds game concept was born. So it states here, they knew they were able to make some good games, but the problem they had was distributing it out to people. If you're distributing food, you're giving it to the people that either need it or as many as possible. And particularly when you develop an app or a game, the more people you can distribute it to, the more devices you can get that app on, the more success you're going to have. But they found that distribution, getting the game out there, that was the hard bit. They'd made 51 games basically before Angry Birds. 51. But the model or the framework that they were using for those games, it proved unviable. meaning that it just wasn't an option. It wasn't working. So 51 titles before Angry Birds. When would you have given up? It's a lot of work into each of those titles, isn't it? So they were at the point where they thought, you know what, this just isn't going to work for us. The idea of closing down. If a business or a shop is closing down, it's meaning it's no longer going to offer anything. It's closing down. It will be no more. And that kept coming to their minds. So they said, look, let's just give it one more shot. Let's just give it one more go. And then after that, look, we're closing down. We can't keep doing this. Okay, 51 titles before Angry Birds. That's a lot. The team's artists would regularly come up with concepts or ideas and drawings. But there was one that stood out. It showed a bunch of round cartoon birds who, for some reason, looked cross or angry. There was something about those characters, says Mikhail. These birds have no feet and can't fly, and they are really angry. We all started thinking about why they are so angry. For such simple characters, they made us think so much. There was some magic to it. So this is interesting. So they've got this team of artists. They were always coming up with concepts, ideas. Sometimes a car company will release a concept car. Doesn't mean it's going to be the final result, but it's an idea. So they were artists always coming up with ideas and drawings. But there was one that stood out, one that caught everybody's attention. And it was a bunch of round cartoon birds. Perhaps you can think of the little fat red birds. And they looked cross. If you look cross, you look angry. You look frustrated. Perhaps you've got a frown. These birds looked cross. They've got no feet. They can't fly. And basically, they're really angry. And there was something about these simple characters that really got them thinking. They said there was some kind of magic to their little angry faces. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see now, I've got a picture here. They're just angry birds. They are quite literally angry birds. Hence the name. I didn't have to say that, did you? I'm sure you got that. Okay. Rovio finally came up with a reason the birds looked angry. Looked so angry. Some pigs had stolen their eggs. So the company decided to make a game, around the concept. The birds would have to be launched into the air and strike pigs off their pedestals. Rovio dedicated a budget of €25,000 for the game, and the team worked on Angry Birds as a hobby project. So I think this is really interesting that actually this company, Rovio, they came up with the face of an angry bird first, and they said, look, I like this. We've got an angry bird. But why are they angry? That was the idea that came second. Quite interesting, that. So the idea they came up with is that some pigs had stolen their eggs. So the company, they're going to make a game based around the fact that pigs had stolen these angry birds' eggs. And the birds would be launched into the air, bearing in mind, they can't fly, and they would strike these pigs off the pedestals. And when you play the game, you kind of just crash into a load of items, and you've got to remove as many pigs from the level as possible. Such a simple concept, isn't it? Such a simple idea. So they said, look, let's put €25,000 to this and see if we can make it work. During the 6 months it took to develop the game, Rovio was working on other projects too, and produced 4 games for other companies. But even while the team was developing the game, they knew it was going to be special. When you had to shoot the bird once to test a feature, you accidentally started playing the game for 15 minutes, and there would be 5 guys watching you, says Mikhail. And when a co-founder's mother ended up burning her Christmas turkey because she was busy playing a pre-release version of the game, they knew they were onto something. So this is really interesting. They knew they were onto something when they were testing features of the game. Perhaps just only had to test one feature. It would take 1 minute, but they realised 15 minutes later they're still playing the game. Oh, wow. Okay, if we're feeling that way, maybe we're onto something. And one of the co-founders' mother, cooking turkey. But because she was busy paying a pre-release, So she's playing a version of the game which is before it's released. So there might be a few bugs or glitches or things. It's not fully released yet. So she's playing a pre-release version of the game. She burnt the food because she was so into the game. So because of this reaction, because of this feeling when playing it, they thought, we are really onto something here. I like this. The game, though, wasn't an immediate hit. Angry Birds had released on the App Store in December 2009, and the response was tepid in the lucrative markets of the US and the UK. But Rovio wasn't fazed. It decided to focus on smaller countries. With only a few hundred downloads, the game hit the top charts in their native Finland. So this is interesting. So they released the game in 2009, and the response was tepid. It was quite cool. It wasn't an immediate rush to download this game, particularly in the US and the UK markets, which are often the markets that you want to break, particularly on an app store. So it was tepid. It wasn't kicking off in the lucrative, the successful, the money-making markets of the US and the UK. But Rovio wasn't phased, meaning they weren't bothered, they weren't fussed. He said, look, let's focus on the smaller countries. Let's get this game out to the smaller countries. And with only a few hundred downloads, in their native Finland, it hit the top charts. So that's a good sign, isn't it? That's a sign, okay, we've got something. If it's successful in this countries, we just got to get it distributed out to the other countries. But it was a signal that they're most certainly onto something. It soon started doing well in Sweden and Denmark, then made inroads in Greece and the Czech Republic. With 40,000 downloads in place, soon the bigger market started taking notice. On 11th February 2010, Apple featured Angry Birds on the UK App Store as the game of the week. Angry Birds finally exploded. Over the next 3 days, it went from the 600th position to the first position on the UK store. By April, the game was number 1 on the US App Store too. Isn't that incredible? So after the success in Finland, it was a bit of a snowball effect, wasn't it? It started doing well in Sweden and Denmark, and it talks about making inroads. It managed to get in with Greece and the Czech Republic. So the downloads were increasing. So that distribution started to happen. And then in 2010, Apple featured Angry Birds on the UK App Store as Game of the Week, and this was the point where it exploded. The success of this game absolutely went viral, went from 600th position to first position in 3 days. And then by April, so February, March, April, 3 months later, it was number 1 on the US App Store too. Remember, this is their 52nd release. This is not your first 10, your first 20, even your first 40. This is their 52nd attempt. They were on the verge of bankruptcy. They're on the verge of failing, of giving up. Imagine if they'd given up at 51. Isn't that a lesson for us to learn? Imagine if they'd given up at that point. But they didn't. We'll talk about that in a moment. The popularity meant that Rovio was quickly making lots of money. Downloads on the App Store were paid, and on Android, the company decided to run ads on the game. Soon, the Android versions were netting in £600,000 a month. Rovio clearly created in-game purchase. Rovio cleverly created in-game purchases too. An 89p Mighty Eagle that helped you clear any level was downloaded more than 2 million times. By 2013, the company currently had a catalogue of more than 30,000 Angry Bird related products on sale in more than 500 locations around the world, which accounted for close to 50% of its revenue, or its profit, or its money it was making. Several outlets, such as Pop Gear, have cashed in on the craze for Angry Birds merchandise. So, you just see here that it was an absolute success. So on Android, they decided to run ads on the game. Of course, you get paid, don't you, when ads were displayed when people are playing the game. So that brought them in, that netted in around £600,000 a month. And then they created in-game purchases. 89 pence, not necessarily a lot of money, but there was an eagle that, would clear any level. That was downloaded more than 2 million times. Just that little in-app purchase, just constantly pushing forward, constantly, what else can we get from this? The Angry Birds wasn't just any other game. With more than 3 billion global downloads, I think it's actually more than 5 billion, it's one of the most popular freemium games of all time. By freemium, basically meaning it's a free premium game. And it's become one of the few games that's effortlessly transcended into other mediums. Angry Birds has been spun off into a TV series. It's lent its name to rides at entertainment parks and has even become a full-length Hollywood movie. I mean, absolutely incredible. When it talks here, it says it's effortlessly transcended into other mediums. Basically saying that it's without even a lot of hard work, without even, a lot of time and effort. Because of the success of it, it's just effortlessly transcended or evolved or kind of moved into movies, TV series, merchandise, entertainment parks. I think even near me, there's a theme park called Thorpe Park. Well, that's a tongue twister. Try saying that. A theme park called Thorpe Park. Good little tongue twister there. But I know they used to have a complete Angry Birds section of the whole park. Incredible. Just this little company from Sweden. And it's even become a full-length Hollywood movie. Don't you think that is such an encouraging story? As I said at the beginning, it's very true, isn't it, that as humans, we often only see the success at the end of something. We very often see all of the hard work. We very often see everything that's gone into it before the success. And for example, when we talk about this company, they were on the verge of giving up. They were on the verge of saying, look, we just got to sack this in. We can't keep doing this. What are we going to do? 51 titles later, maybe it's just time just to not do it. But imagine if they'd given up at that point. And I know I've been at that point with things where I just think, you know what, let's just give up. Particularly, I know even with the podcast, I think about 6 months ago, it was doing well, but I just thought, is it worth it? I have to be honest, get that at some points now. I think to myself, is it worth keep going? I love doing it, but is it worth it? And I find this story really encouraging because maybe there's something at the moment that you're working through or that you're really trying to make successful or to make a success of. And let's just say that is learning English or improving your English. Don't give up. Keep working hard. Keep going at it because we could be just on the verge of breaking into the next level of fluency. We could be just on the verge of tipping our accent a little bit more just to make it a bit clearer, or our vocabulary. We could just be on the verge of learning some new words. But if we give up now, then we miss just going over that verge, so to speak. If they had given up, they would never have had this success. They would probably be working for other studios, doing a 9 to 5, and that's it. They would never have had this success. And no doubt, they never knew that it was going to go this far. They never knew it was going to be this successful, but it was. And I just really find this encouraging that there's so many things, isn't there, where we do just perhaps think about giving up. We do think about, it's time to sack it in. But there are points with certain things in life where you do just have to call it a day. It's time to just stop for whatever reason. Maybe that's the right reason for you. But if you're just stopping because you're thinking, it's just not happening, well, maybe it's just the element of a little bit of change. Coming up with something new, like they did for Angry Birds, just a new concept, a new idea that they just liked. And I think that's the point that really stuck with me. They felt a magic in the idea of just this simple Angry Birds. They liked the idea themselves. They liked the principle. They liked the game, the concept of it. And I think that is what made it so successful, because they believed in it. They liked it. So I think for me, that's a good lesson, because we've got to like what we're doing. We've got to like and enjoy the way we're learning English, the podcasts we're listening to. Thank you very much for your support. The films we're watching, the TV shows, the books we're reading, the speaking videos that we're following along. We've got to like them. If we like them, we're much more likely to continue and to be successful. But the worst thing we can really do is give up. So if you are at a point where you're struggling with your English, don't give up. Just, keep on pushing through, keep on trying, try new things, and just keep going for it. Just keep going for it. And this company is a brilliant example of just keep pushing through, change things up a little bit when you need to, but success could be just around the corner. Lovely article. I hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any questions at all, please do reach out to me. Let me know in the comments and I'll get back to pretty much all of you. Now, one question I've been asked a lot over the last week. I've had loads of comments and actually a few emails saying, Gideon, I really like your podcasts, but I'm struggling to speak. If that is you, if you are feeling that way, don't worry, okay? Don't worry. That, if you're enjoying the podcast, enjoying listening to English, absolutely fantastic. But I just wanted to give you some pointers, some suggestions on how to improve your speaking skills, particularly if you are a lower level. Often with this podcast, we focus on more intermediate to advanced. But if you are just a lower level of English, which isn't a problem at all, you're just on a different stage of the journey, just some suggestions for you. Firstly is, a long time ago, actually I say a long time, probably about a year ago, I did a lot of Speak English with me videos where you just follow along with myself speaking and we read off the screen and you practice and you get in the rhythm and the flow. They are brilliant exercises to practice and improve your speaking skills. So I encourage you just to look at them on YouTube and practice them. If you need to slow them down, you can. Just type in GSL-English, Speak English with me, and they'll come up. But they are a brilliant way of practicing your speaking skills and getting the muscles moving in the way that they need to for English. It's all about muscle memory, activating that and getting your muscles used to doing what they need to do to speak English. So highly recommend you go back and do that. Also, if you are watching on YouTube and it is a lesson where we're perhaps going through an article like we did today, repeat after me, okay? So I think I made a couple of mistakes when reading today, but don't worry about that. But just read along with me, or perhaps listen, pause after a sentence and repeat. These aren't just a case of listening. You can actually actively practice this with me. So when I'm reading a paragraph, read after me. Or if you're just simply listening, repeat after me, even if it's just after one sentence. Just repeat what you hear to the best of your ability. Just find ways that you feel comfortable speaking and do them as much as you can. Another way, grab a book you like, grab a magazine, find an article on the internet and just read it out loud. It's not always about perfection, perfect accent, perfect pronunciation. It's just the act or the process of speaking out loud. Do that as much as you can within your level, and then focus on pronunciation and accent and things like that. But there are plenty of resources, even within this GSL English sphere, for you to practice speaking. So don't just view this podcast as a listening or reading exercise. There's also opportunity there to practice your speaking skills. But there you go. That's my 2 cents on improving your speaking skills. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you came away with some new vocabulary. You enjoyed the English language with me, but also I hope you found it encouraging. Don't give up. You might just be round the corner of success. And if you're thinking about starting something, a business, YouTube channel, whatever it is, do it. What have you got to lose? There we go. Thank you so much for joining me again. I do appreciate your support, and I'll see you all very soon. Have a good one, guys.